What's up, everybody? Celtic Scare here, back whenever you get those 10 and 20 views. This is part 2 of my reaction to the Bad Electricians video. American legendary Marine sniper Carlos Whitefeather Hathcock. I put this in 2 parts because I did not feel like making you guys sit through, an hour and a half of the video plus my reaction. Also, links to the original video is in the description, and his shop, I think, are the 2 things in his description that I do have. That being said, as long as Norton's doesn't try to interject or trying to get a free ad, let's get back to the video.
So at this point, Carlos and the entire Scout Sniper experiment on Hill 55 is proving to be extremely effective, and word is spreading throughout the Marine Corps and the local military operating area, and they have gotten the nickname Murder Inc.
Great name, great name. Also, Visual Potion, green screen plus yellow power.
So some press officer, in a stroke of genius, I assume, says to himself, wow, there's this new experimental type of unit being extremely successful by being sneaky and unseen, and the enemy doesn't know about them. I should write a newspaper article about them to let everybody back home know how effective these guys are. So now Jim Land, Carlos, and the rest of Hill 55 are all pissed off. You know, nothing a sniper enjoys more than when you shine a fucking spotlight on them. Mainly, Ho Chi Minh puts
Yep. That'll do it.
a bounty on both Jim Land and...
I wonder if this is like a kind of like redone version of like the actual ad.
Carlos Hathcock's head, and sends his very best sniper to go collect those bounties, a guy by the name of Cobra. But Carlos doesn't know that for sure. That's just the word on the street, until one day there's a young Marine staff sergeant passing by Carlos's tent, and he stops to have a conversation with somebody right by the door of Carlos's tent, and he gets shot by an enemy sniper. Carlos runs out of the tent, sees what happened. He immediately puts together this enemy sniper's probably been watching him for days, and he knew that that was Carlos's tent, and he saw that that NCO was about the same size, same build as him. The enemy sniper thought that he'd just killed Whitefeather. And Carlos Hathcock is absolutely furious. He grabs his rifle, he grabs John Burke, and they head off in the direction that that shot came from, looking for this enemy sniper. They're proceeding with caution, looking for an enemy sniper, stalking their way up there the entire time, so it takes a long time, but they finally work their way down over to the next hill and start working their way up, and they end up finding this sniper's hide. As they're climbing this hill, it started to level out a little bit, and then it dipped back down into this tiny little creek waterway, and then it started going right back up. The creek wasn't even visible unless you were literally right on top of it. It was the perfect spot for a sniper to be. And the little tiny creek was perfect to slip down into and make a perfect, clean, covered getaway and go completely unnoticed. So Carlos goes...
We're now getting counter-sniping measures.
You know, that's exactly what I would do. So he starts following this waterway to see where it leads, and they're following it, and they're following it, and sure enough, they come up, and on the other side of this little waterway is the biggest, muddiest, most intentional looking footprints on the fucking planet. Carlos immediately knows that if he follows those footprints, he is going to be walking face first into a trap, because that sniper realizes that he had just fired upon an entire hilltop full of snipers, and surely one of them is going to come after him after he had just killed the infamous Whitefeather. So whatever is on the other side of those,
or we thought was Whitefeather,
footprints is handcrafted by a sniper to kill another sniper. Carlos is looking at the footprints, weighing his options. He could call in artillery and just level the entire side of the mountain from there on out, but that wouldn't be a guarantee, and he needs to make sure, because this guy is too dangerous. The problem is this hasn't really been done before, okay? This sniper platoon that's experimental and is paving the way for sniper warfare hasn't run into this issue where they have to go toe-to-toe with a near peer and they have the upper hand. Carlos is kind of nervous. This sniper's good. He's done everything the exact same way that Carlos would have done it. Later in his life, he was interviewed about this, and the interviewer asked him if he was scared, to which Carlos replied, "I was never scared. But at this point, I was very, very alert." At this point, Carlos says, this guy's good, but he's not better than me. There's no way. He then proceeds to don his plot armor, and him and John Burke walk face first into a trap. So they're following this guy's trail. It's so obvious it's got to be intentional. And they come up onto this clearing, and off in the distance, they see the most obvious tiny little one-man campsite on the face of the planet. There's no way a sniper this good is being this obvious. So Carlos is just frozen, trying to figure out what is going on and what this guy's thinking so that he can counter it. He's trying to be one step of the enemy.
Watches actually the guy being just so cocky that he got away perfectly, that he's just being like reckless.
knowing that the enemy is already one step ahead of him. So he just asks himself, what would he be doing in this situation? And he comes to the conclusion that the enemy sniper is probably expecting whoever's following him to come up onto that campsite to investigate, meaning that that enemy sniper has a hide somewhere with a perfect shot directly at that campsite. So Carlos reevaluates everything, deciding where he would pick the perfect shot if he had to shoot at somebody at that little campsite, and he finds it. So Carlos and John start maneuvering out and around so that they can get a perfect shot at where they think this sniper is going to be set up. It takes them a while. They're proceeding with a lot of caution. They're moving super slow, but they end up making it there, and they start scanning the entire area where they think that enemy sniper might be, looking for a very well-concealed enemy. John Burke using his binoculars, and Carlos using the scope on his rifle. They're scanning, they're looking for this guy, and time passes, they keep looking, and suddenly there's a gunshot, and Carlos's heart falls into his stomach. Time stops. He doesn't know if he's hit, or worse, if John got hit, and maybe his overconfidence walking face first into a trap just got his best friend killed. And then John Burke says the last thing that Carlos ever wanted to hear, "I'm hit." And as he says that, Carlos feels warm liquid hitting up against his leg from John Burke's direction as he looks down and sees water soaking into his pants. And he looks over. John Burke's canteen had just gotten shot off of his hip, and John was fine. Carlos, absolutely relieved, tells John Burke, "It's just your canteen, get up, we gotta go." They break contact, then they re-enter their stock. The only way out of this now is to kill him first, and they don't.
Talk about the devil's luck, man. We thought Trump got lucky by slightly turning his head. No, this is a trained marksman getting the canteen. Ooh.
Don't know where he's at. Hopefully, he doesn't know where they're at either. But they do kind of know where that initial shot came from, so they start making their way there through this irregular route, stalking along the way, trying to find this guy, and they're stalking. It takes them forever, but they finally get to where this guy took the shot, and they find his hide. Again, it's a perfect textbook hide, exactly what Carlos would have done. And Carlos is looking around, trying to figure out where the hell this guy went. And then Carlos looks down to where they were, and he sees a glint, and they hunker down, and he asks John Burke, "Did you just see that?" And John's like, "Yeah, but it could have been a moth, it could have been anything." And he's like, "Yeah, but that's exactly where we were." And Carlos realizes maybe this guy did the exact same that Carlos had just done. He had went to where the enemy was last. And then Carlos realizes that the sun is now on his back, and in his prior position, the sun was in his face. And then he realizes that John Burke's canteen was metallic on top, and maybe Cobra saw the glint off of his canteen, and that's why he took that shot. Carlos doesn't miss, but Cobra didn't miss either. He just picked a bad target. Then Carlos sees the glint again, and he just fires instinctively right out of the gate. And again, time stops. John Burke can't believe that he took that shot. Maybe it was a moth. Hell, maybe it was Cobra, and he has a canteen too. At least then they'll be even. And they wait. It feels like forever, but it's only like a second. And out of the shadows of where this glint was, a rifle barrel comes into the sunlight, and they see it as Hathcock reloads and gets ready to make a secondary shot. The barrel falls to the ground. Cobra falls on top of it, sliding down the hill a little under this awkward resting position. They wait, they watch. Carlos is ready to make this follow-up shot, but this guy's not moving. So they finally get up. They make their way over to his body. As they approach him, John Burke realizes that Carlos is shot directly through the enemy's scope, not even touching the sides of the tube. At this point, Carlos immediately...
I watched the video not that long ago, and the fat electrician was on it. It was by, if I can ever find the video. It helps if I spelt the name right in the search bar of my history. Yeah, I'll put the link in the description. It's Pew View. Was the Marine sniper shot through the scope real? And these guys did a really cool video of it. Like I said, I'll link that in the description too.
Immediately realizes for that to happen, Cobra had to have been looking directly at him as well. Not John Burke, not somewhere else. The only way that shot was possible was for both of them to be looking right at each other at the exact same moment, and Carlos was just quicker to pull the trigger. And maybe, just maybe, the only reason that Cobra saw Carlos first and not John Burke was because of a chicken feather. Carlos actually ends up deciding that he's going to take Cobra's rifle with him. He brings it back to the base, and at some point during his deployment, it ends up getting stolen, and he can't prove that he made this shot. That's
Oh,
because
here
it's
we
all
go.
complete BS. He made it up. He never made that shot. Even the great Mythbusters couldn't recreate this shot, and they tried repeatedly. Buh. Yeah.
Oh, is he going to bring up the PewView channel himself?
People have tried to recreate this shot. To the best of my knowledge, nobody's actually been successful at doing it, and it's probably because nobody's put forward a good effort. Even Mythbusters, with the Discovery Channel budget, managed to mess this up to the degree that it's atrocious. Okay, the first time they tried it, they shot it at a modern scope. Obviously not going to work right out of the gate. It's doomed for failure because
Yeah, I think that is the video from PewView.
modern scope has about 10 times as much shit inside of it, and there's no way you're going to be able to penetrate through it. Then they realized that they were shooting at a modern scope, so they got a Mosin Nagant period accurate scope, which is what Cobra would have had, and he should be able to penetrate through that scope way easier. Had they not been shooting at it with a 308 fucking hollow point round. Okay, if you don't know,
I just got into firearm owning, and that I have over there is a 22 revolver, but hollow points are designed to break apart. Like, that thing would have hit and just shattered.
hollow point round is designed so it immediately expands and dumps all of its energy on impact, okay? You're trying to penetrate through something. Why would you fire a round designed to expand and dump its energy? If I wanted
Like, there was a movie about the Vietnam War called Full Metal Jacket. Get that one.
to stab a motherfucker at a skating rink, do you think I'd have better success with an icicle or a snowball? Then, after that, they're like, oh, well, you know what? We should actually try shooting at it with a 30-06 round, which is exactly what Hathcock would have been shooting. But the only gun that we can afford that's chambered in 30-06 on our Discovery Channel budget is some old M1 Grand, and we're also not going to put Full Metal Jacket, regular plain old 30-06 rounds in it. We're going to use an armor-piercing round, so it's obviously going to work, and it's also going to cast doubt on the entire thing because there's a 0% chance that a sniper in Vietnam had access to armor-piercing ammunition. Okay, all you have to do to recreate this shot the right way so we can know for sure if this is even possible is get a Winchester Model 70, get a 30-06 Full Metal Jacket round, and get a 3X Mosin Nagant scope and shoot it through the scope and see what happens. And to the best of my knowledge, it's never, ever been done until now. For this,
Ah, yes. Here's the video I saw not too long
teamed
ago.
up with my friend Nick Johnson over from the PewView channel. He's the best shot I know. If I know anybody that can get this done, it's gonna be him. But we didn't want to just capture this on camera. We're potentially proving history if we can get this done. We wanted to capture this on camera to the best quality that technology currently allows. And for that, we called up my other friends, Adam and Bryce from the Ballistic High Speed channel, and they drove up from Indiana with their fancy ass cameras, and we captured this shot at 100,000 frames per second. And Nick Johnson managed to do it on the first try. Not only did the bullet manage to penetrate all the way through the scope and into the head without touching the sides, just like Hathcock said, it
I see the force wave going through it.
also managed to push a significant amount of the internals of the scope as well as powdered glass directly into the brain as well. It absolutely would have been fatal. We actually captured more angles of this shot and a bunch of more footage as to how we set everything up and how we got it done. And that's all going to be put together into a long form video over on PewView's channel, and he should be releasing it the same exact day that I release this. So after this video, you can go check his video out, and then hopefully after that, you'll go check out Adam and Bryce over at Ballistic High Speed. They're in
Yeah, my RPG 7 blew up is the craziest video I think you'll ever watch.
entire channel is stuff just like this. So yeah, if a bunch of random dudes can come together on an afternoon in the middle of a cornfield and recreate this shot on the first try, not only is it plausible, it's absolutely probable that Carlos Hathcock, the winner of the Wimbledon Cup and one of the greatest snipers ever, managed to do it in real life. Also, not trying to brag or toot my own horn too much, but I only bothered tracking down and buying one Mosin Nagant scope because I was that confident we were going to get this done on the very first try.
Oh God. Star Wars music. I had to pause because you never know.
Yeah, babe.
What are all these telescopes doing on my counter?
I just take them to Kohl's and return them. I don't need them anymore. Yeah, you have horrible timing. Love you.
Okay.
Bye.
I use that same music for my dad.
So for Carlos's next adventure, it's not really an adventure. He ends up getting stuck on Hill 55 doing a bunch of Overwatch duty. Basically, he's up on top of Hill 55, which is kind of right by the Ho Chi Minh Trail. If enemies walk by, he shoots at them. The problem is, by this point, Hill 55 has been occupied by snipers for months, and the Viet Cong have kind of figured out that that particular hill is a little bit spicier than the other ones, and they can put accurate fire out a lot further than most other hills could. So they just stay extra far away from it, which, you know, to be fair, brilliant plan.
Hey, it's actually learning.
That's exactly what I would do. So,
oh god, he's starting that zoom out mode, which means they didn't do that.
Overwatch duty, kind of boring. Carlos Hathcock is just kind of sitting up there. He can see these bad guys way off in the distance, right? They're on the Ho Chi Minh Trail. They're smuggling stuff. They're doing recon on the hill, whatever they're up to. He just doesn't have a gun that's both accurate and powerful enough to reach out there and do something about it. So then one day, a couple of Seabees show up and they're building something for Hill 55. And Carlos goes over to the Seabees because, I mean, let's face it, the Seabees can build just about anything with virtually nothing. And he's like, hey, I need you guys to build me a mount for an M250 cal so I can just pop the scope off of my Winchester, throw it on the 50 cal, zero it, and then I have a longer ranged weapon for when I'm on Overwatch duty on top of the hill. And the Seabees are like, sure, no problem. Here you
Like, okay, that sounds like fun. We want to see you test this.
go. Made it for him right away. So now every time Carlos shows up to Overwatch, he pops the scope off of his Winchester, mounts it onto the M250 cal, and then he just has to zero it to the 50 cal. And he does that by shooting at a rock 2,500 yards away. And he knows he's zeroed enough when he can hit the same rock 3 times. Don't get me wrong, it's a big ass rock. It's more like a boulder. And just to be clear, so we're all on the same page, the 50 cal is definitely more accurate with a scope, but it's also definitely not a precision sniper rifle by any means. When you're shooting out to crazy distances like 2,500 yards, the quality of the gun and the quality of the ammunition really start to matter. If I did the math right, a 50 caliber BMG round traveling out of an M250 caliber Medusa at 2,500 yards, even if Carlos shot perfect, that round could still wind up anywhere within a 6-foot diameter.
That's 1.42 miles, just for people who don't know what that is.
Of where he was actually aiming, and none of that would be on him. It's literally just the variability between the weapons platform and the ammunition. Obviously, Carlos Hathcock knows this, but it's still going to be a lot of fun because he was just sitting up there bored, unable to do anything, and now he's at least going to be able to scare the shit out of people. So that's what happens. Every time Carlos shows up for Overwatch duty, he pops the scope off of his Winchester, mounts it onto the M250 caliber, and then he zeroes it on a boulder 2,500 yards away.
They couldn't just give him a second scope?
Way just to get it as close as humanly possible. Then one day on Overwatch duty, Hathcock's just scanning the perimeter, doing his normal thing, and he stops cold in his tracks. He's like, there's no way this is happening. And he motions over, LT, get over here, get on the spotting scope. Look at this. LT gets on the spotting scope. He's like, okay, what am I looking at? And he's like, you see that dude, the scout with the binoculars, 2,500 yards out there? Not seeing him. He's like, he's literally sitting on a rock. Which rock is he sitting on? The one with all the bullet marks on it that I use to zero this gun every day is the rock that he's sitting on. The misfortune of this man is palpable. The LT sees him and is like,
what? You just gotta look down going, oh, that's not a good sign. I don't like this.
holy shit. Carlos Hathcock fires. Okay, here's the thing with this. Shooting an M250 cal at 2,500 yards, if I did this math right, that's going to take like 2.8 seconds for that round to get there, okay? That's almost 3 whole Mississippi. 3 Mississippi after firing a round is like 3 minutes in the bedroom. It's basically an eternity. As they're watching in their scopes, the milliseconds are going by like hours. And this dude way out there on the rock apparently got done looking at whatever he was looking at and goes to stand up. At this point, Carlos is like, I missed. There's no way I'm gonna hit this. And as soon as he stands up completely, he catches this round directly in the head.
Deep center field.
Oh.
Lamar racing back, getting to the wall. He jumps and he makes the catch.
Oh, I thought you were going to go with, there's a lot of baseball ones where the guy pop fly and it hits him in the head.
That was awesome.
And this is actually the world record for the longest distance confirmed kill in combat from 1967 until it was broken in 2002. It took almost 40 years of technological advancement and a sniper shooting an actual big-ass, hopped-up, modern-day sniper rifle, and he only beat Carlos Hathcock's record by 30 yards. Now, to be...
Also, Carlos probably did that probably on 1 shot. I think the other guy took like 5. Like, I think I saw the video where the bullets were hitting like up high.
Completely fair, as I've kind of already explained, there was a fair amount of luck involved in him actually landing this shot, and he is the first person to actually admit that in his interviews. However, Getting lucky is also kind of a skill, and Carlos Hathcock just doesn't miss.
And if he hadn't stood up, I'd went over his head. But as luck would have it, he stood up. He caught that chunk of lead.
Sometimes it's better to be lucky than good.
Carlos's stint doing Overwatch duty on Hill 55 would finally be broken when the Viet Cong sent out a group of counter snipers to attack Hill 55, and Carlos in particular. As they continued to have interactions with this counter sniper unit, the snipers on Hill 55 came to figure out that there was about 5 men being led by a highly trained female counter sniper known as Apache. There was no women in combat roles during Vietnam, and they definitely would have been in a role as prestigious as a leader of a sniper crew.
I don't think the communists care about that kind of stuff.
Maybe. Let's give it the 2-second Google test. Women in Viet Cong. Several million Vietnamese women served in the military and in the militias during the war, both for the North and the South of Vietnam. So women absolutely did find their way into combat during the Vietnam War. Now, that doesn't necessarily mean that they were a highly trained sniper, so let's examine that more closely. The Vietnam War is essentially America versus guerrilla fighters known as the Viet Cong, and the Viet Cong are being backed by the NVA, the North Vietnamese Army, and the North Vietnamese Army is being backed by the USSR. So since the USSR
And China. They're kind of ones who stopped us from completely taking over that small island, peninsula.
is advising them, training them, and supplying them, the question becomes, would the USSR ever consider training and utilizing female snipers? Not only would they, they're literally the most famous people on the planet for doing it. In 1942, the USSR started a female-only sniper school because they believed that females excelled at the job of being a sniper. They believed that women were exceptionally good at this because people always underestimate women and don't see them as a threat. They were easier to conceal because they had smaller stature. They exhibited a greater pain tolerance, they were more patient, and they were easier to teach because they didn't have as big of an ego. And you know what? There's a solid argument they were right, because a lot of the women...
Yeah, that makes sense. Also, it keeps women off the front line. It allows them to help.
that came out of that program ended up being some of the most successful snipers in human history. Literally, the Lady of Death, Ludmila Pavlichenko, who has 309 confirmed kills, came out of this program. And there's a ton more that have kill counts in the 2 and even 3-digit range.
Probably thinking, what? This is crazy.
Sorry, I'm getting sidetracked. Apache and her crew decide that the best way to try to take out the snipers on Hill 55 is to go around to the local villages, capturing South Vietnamese that they believe are aiding the Americans on Hill 55. And they capture them, and then at night they get them within earshot of the hill and torture them to death so that the Marines can hear their screams at night. And this is going on every night for like 2 weeks straight. The Marines are pissed, they're distraught, they don't know what to do because they know it's a trap. Okay, she has her whole crew set up with sniper positions, trained on her, and if they go in and find her and track her down, they're going to be walking face first into a trap. There's literally nothing they can do because she only comes out and does this at night. And they never know where she's going to be doing it because she does it in a different spot every single night.
Oh, God. Yeah. Talented and crazy. That's not a good combo.
The only thing the Marines can do is go out the next morning, find the remains of her latest victim, and clean that up. And one day, Carlos is on the detail to go out and collect those remains and get everything taken care of. But today, it wasn't a North Vietnamese soldier or somebody helping out the Americans. It was a Marine. Seeing the remains of this young Marine that's been tortured to death, Carlos has never been so mad in his entire life. He goes back to Hill 55, gets his shit, gets ready, goes to Jim Land, tells him, I'm gonna go kill this bitch. To which Jim Land says, I'm coming with you, and they go out together. So Carlos...
Yeah, your top guy says, yeah, I'm going to go do something. Yeah, I'm with you.
Hathcock and Jim Land set out to stalk Apache. They have no idea where she's going to be next, but they do know where she's been most recently and the sites she hasn't been to for a while. So they go to one of the sites she's about due to visit and set up a hide. They're there all day, just scanning everywhere with the scope of their rifle and with their spotting scope. They're taking turns back and forth on who's on the rifle, who's on the spotting scope, because being in the prone firing position is absolutely exhausting. Carlos has just been in the prone for about an hour, and he goes to hand the rifle to Jim, and right as he hands the rifle to him, they both have a hand on it. Apache and 3 of her snipers appear off in the distance. Both Carlos and Jim tense up, not wanting to let go of the rifle because both of them want to take this shot because it's personal. This little tug of war ends up alerting Apache, and she disappears and the shot's gone. Both Jim Land and Carlos Hathcock are embarrassed. Now Apache...
Yeah. Should have brought 2 rifles.
knows they're out there hunting her, but That's what she's wanted all along, so they know that she's going to come and try to outsnipe them. So they're going to remove to a different hide where they're going to have a look at their current hide and the area around it and try to spot her when she comes for them. So they go, they get their new hide set up, and they're waiting all day. They're scanning and they're waiting, and somewhere along the line, Jim Land calls into the artillery guys and gets them set up with the exact coordinates of this entire area. That way, if they do show up, he's at least going to cover this place with artillery shells and try to take them out that way. And they keep waiting all day long, and then right at dusk, as the sun is about to go down completely, they see 5 shadowy figures off in the distance of the wood line sneaking around. But they're not sure it's them yet, so they just continue to watch, and then this crew starts stalking around, going around the old location where Hathcock and Land were. So this has to be them. So they're waiting for a good shot, and then one of the figures steps off to the side and squats down to do something. Maybe they're tying their shoe, maybe they got to check the map, something. But Jim Land takes this opportunity to radio in and start dropping artillery on that location.
Yeah, we're sniping from very far away with
The
very
first
big
artillery
bullets.
shell lands literally seconds later. These Marines had this dialed in so close already. And as the first shell lands, that shadowy figure is still squatting down, and Carlos realizes that's got to be Apache, and she's squatting down to take a piss. Carlos realizes this the second the first artillery round hits, and when that happens, Apache stands up and starts sprinting away. Carlos follows her with his crosshairs, gets a bead on her as she continues to run, and he fires. She collapses. Carlos immediately reloads the bolt on his Winchester and fires again into her body as it lies lifeless on the ground. 3 of the other
Hey, double tap, just be safe.
figures have been taken down by the artillery, and there's now just one man running away. Carlos immediately shifts over and fires on him, dropping him as well. After the artillery barrage stopped, there was eerie silence as Carlos and Jim Land approached their corpses. They ended up recovering Apache's sniper log, proving that it was her. Later in life, Carlos said that his first shot at Apache when she was running at a full sprint while artillery was going off all around him at dusk was the best shot he's ever made, and the most personal one.
Guy in front of her was trying to get her to stop because they were running right towards us where they'd seen us before. He trying to get her to stop. She didn't, but I stopped her. And I put one extra for good measure.
For the first time he took somebody out that was not that hamburger that he always said. It's probably like, no, I'm going after this bitch personally.
Because that was the best shot I ever made, I think.
The Frenchman.
So Carlos Hathcock, Jim Land, and John Burke are all back on Hill 55. Things are kind of starting to slow down. I mean, they're still going out on missions, they're still doing Overwatch duty, but they're not having run-ins with any more main characters, you know, people with nicknames and prowess. It's just your typical anonymous bad guys, your Homer Hamburger type situations. Now, Carlos has been in theater for about 11 months. Remember, the first
I missed.
4 was him being an MP guarding the front gate to a base, but the other 7 months have been pretty fast-paced and non-stop the entire time. So in the next month or 2, he should be heading back home to see his wife Josephine, and he's ready for it. He's tired. He's been through an awful lot. At this point, he has about 86 confirmed kills and hundreds of probables that can't be confirmed because there wasn't an officer present to witness it. Then one day, out of the blue on Hill 55, a bunch of Force Recon Marines show up, but they're not acting like your normal Force Recon Marines. These guys show up. There's no pleasantries. There's no, hi, how are you? There's no introductions. My name's so-and-so. I'm from this unit. That, nothing. They show up and are like, are you Carlos Hathcock? And he's like, yeah, that's me. And he's like, we need the best sniper around to go on a mission. I can't tell you what it is. I just need to know if you want to do it. This entire situation is weird. Carlos is thinking these guys got to be working for the CIA or some special operation that nobody knows about. Either way, he comes to the conclusion he has to be the one to go out on this mission because they're looking for the best sniper for a reason. Clearly, it's got to be extremely dangerous. And Carlos realizes that if he says no, they're just going to go to the next best guy. And if that next best guy isn't good enough to pull this off, Carlos is going to spend the rest of his life wondering that if he'd have gone on this mission, maybe that guy would still be alive. So Carlos agrees to do it. So
Yeah, and there's also that kind of a pride thing of like, hey, they came to me. They must think I'm the only one that can do
they
it.
brief him on this mission. Basically, there's this man that they call the Frenchman that these Fourth Recon Marines have been stalking for months. Apparently, after the French left Vietnam and America took over the theater, This guy stayed for some reason, and he is now helping to run guns between the USSR and the Viet Cong. This group of guys, whether they're Force Recon Marines or CIA or whatever they are, have apparently been watching this guy for months, and this guy never leaves this French villa compound that he lives in. The problem is, they don't know how to get in there and take him out. If they bomb the compound and he's got some type of bomb shelter in there that they don't know about and he ends up surviving, he's going to bounce and he's going to be gone forever, and they can't have that. They also can't send in a small team to take him out because this guy has a ton of security patrolling around this compound 24/7 all day, every day.
Yeah, 'cause he's probably getting paid a shit ton of money, and Russia's been like, we'll give you your own army.
The only time they ever actually get visual confirmation that this guy is inside the compound is when he actually shows up to the front gate to meet with the Viet Cong that are either dropping off or picking up weapons because he doesn't like them coming inside the compound, so he at least shows his face at the gate. So their thought is if they can get a sniper to take him out when he goes to the gate to meet the Viet Cong, that's going to be the best way to guarantee that this guy dies. But the problem with
Just strategy, but is there a good angle for
that is this villa is out in the middle of a grass field for like 800 yards in every single direction, meaning that the closest they're going to be able to get for a sniper is 800 yards away, which is really pushing the limits of what a sniper at this point in time can do, and they don't have anybody with them that can make that shot guaranteed. And this is where Carlos Hathcock comes in. So they give Carlos a topographical map. They tell him, here's the locations that we can insert you with a helicopter. Here's the places that we can extract you. Here's the villa. You pick where you want to line up your shot, however you want to get this done. You tell us, we'll make it happen. Carlos is examining this map.
Yeah, it's kind of want to say like, all right, dude, you're the expert here. We'll run with your play.
He identifies a good spot that he thinks he's going to be able to get this shot off at the front gate. It's about 800 yards away from the gate. From there, they figure the entry point with the helicopter, the extraction point, they get the whole plan laid out. Him and John Burke are going in the very next morning. That night, Carlos spends quite a while memorizing the entire topographical map. He's going to know exactly where they're getting dropped off, exactly all the terrain features in the area that he needs to be able to identify to know where he's going, and exactly how to get from the point he takes a shot back to their extraction point and get out. He doesn't even need to bring the map with him because it is burned into his memory.
Yeah, that's kind of how you need to be on this kind of suicide mission.
Very next morning, Hathcock and Burke jump inside this helicopter. They get flown in, they get inserted, they get dropped off, helicopter takes off. These guys start sneaking their way through this wood line, making their way to where they got to line up this shot. It takes them a couple hours, but they finally make their way up to this big dirt mound right on the edge of the wood line. They get set up, they get their shots lined up, they're looking right at the front of this gate. There's patrols going around, but these guys are 800 yards away from this front gate. They're fine. They're just waiting, watching, and observing all day long, watching for hours and hours and hours. Sure enough, a convoy of cars comes rolling up the road towards this gate. They stop at the gate, a bunch of dudes get out, it's the Viet Cong, and they're waiting at the gate, and sure enough, this massive French guy comes walking out in a white button-up shirt. This dude's well over 6 feet tall. At this point, Carlos is thinking, this is an 800-yard shot. We're really pushing the limits of when I can guarantee I'm going to hit, but this guy's doing everything he can to make it easy for me, wearing that nice white button-up shirt. He literally looks like a silhouette paper target that he's used to shooting back home at the range.
Yeah, this guy's that cocky. It's like the British Army wearing red.
Not only that, but because he's so tall, he is head and shoulders above all these Viet Cong guys. And as soon as he stops walking around and stops to talk at the guy in charge, Carlos lines up his shot, takes it, and just folds the guy in half. One shot, one kill. Hathcock and Burke slide down the reverse side.
That's sniper motto right there.
And start making their way back to the extraction point. The Viet Cong and the guards have no idea what just happened. They don't even know where the shot came from. They're panicked, freaking out, running around. And Carlos and Burke make their getaway back to the helicopter, get picked up, get flown back to Hill 55, get dropped off, and they're like, cool, thanks, get the fuck out of my helicopter, and just ditch them. So now Hathcock and Burke are back at the hill like, this is a weird day. Like, they didn't say thank you.
Yeah, you figure like you got picked up to take out one guy with very little information, and then just got dropped off like within like 72 hours.
They didn't debrief him, nothing. They just asked if the dude's dead. Carlos is like, yep, he's dead. They dropped him off, and that was the end of it. There's no like, we'll be in touch, we'll talk to you soon. Carlos doesn't even know.
Don't tell anybody about this.
Know any of these guys' names. They just dropped him off and bounced.
What the hell just happened?
Now, Carlos doesn't know this at the time, and honestly, he may have never found out because the government didn't even admit that this existed until the late 1990s, but everything about this sounds like MACV-SOG. If you don't know, at this point in time during Vietnam, America has this ultra-secret special forces group known as MACV-SOG, and it is comprised of the very best Army Green Berets, Navy SEALs, and Force Recon Marines available.
Oh, this is probably Delta Force before Delta Force.
And their job is to covertly go into neutral territories like Cambodia and Laos, because the North Vietnamese army is using these neutral countries to smuggle supplies all the way down deep into South Vietnam. So they are going into Cambodia and Laos as well in small man teams trying to stop them. Now, to be completely fair and intellectually honest, I can't prove this, but everything adds up, and I think that Carlos Hathcock just got picked up by some MACV-SOG guys, flown into either Laos or Cambodia without him even knowing, conducted a covert operation inside of a neutral country to help stop the supply chain of supplies getting funneled into South Vietnam to help the Viet Cong. The time period, location, and mission set lines up exactly with what MACV-SOG was doing at the time, and this would explain why they were so secretive and didn't tell Carlos what exactly he was doing or where he was doing it.
Yeah, it's like more likely than not type thing. Also, it's kind of crazy that, like, what do you think? North Vietnam's gonna come after us now and, like, say, like, hey, you broke the rules?
Wherever there is.
I'm actually shocked there's not been that many ads on this video. Like, I had one, the first one, that one.
Back home on Hill 55, some time passes and everything's just regular. It's normal. Wake up, go to battle with Homer Hamburger, go to bed, repeat. This goes on for about a month, and then, sure enough, the Recon Marines / CIA / MACV-SOG, whatever the fuck these guys are, they show back up again asking for Carlos Hathcock. Pretty much the same exact thing happens. No pleasantries, no hi, how are yous, no introductions, doesn't know anybody's name, just, hey, we got a dangerous mission, you're the best man for the job, do you want it or not? And at this point, Carlos Hathcock is 3 weeks away from going home to his wife, Josephine. Absolutely nobody would blame him if he did not want to go out on this top secret, extremely dangerous mission with this weird special forces group that nobody knows who they are.
But our achievement and our feather in the cap, which I wonder if this is where that phrase came from. For him.
But again, Carlos knows that if he doesn't accept this mission, they're just going to go to the next guy, and that guy isn't as good as Carlos Hathcock, and he just can't live with that. Carlos accepts the mission. Okay, they take him in, they brief him on what's going on. It's basically the exact same mission as when he killed the Frenchman, except now it's even harder. This time it's an NBA general. He's living inside of this French villa that's kind of tucked up right by the wood line, overlooking this enormous grass field. And the dude's briefing Carlos, like, this field is like 2,000 yards long. There's no terrain features to get the high ground. There's nowhere to even get a shot close, so obviously you're going to have to shoot from the wood line. The problem with that is they're patrolling around this compound 24/7 all day and night, and they're using dogs. So even if you can get close enough to take the shot, they're going to start looking for you and hunting you down with dogs after the fact, and then you're really going to have a problem. You're probably not going to make it out of this.
Yeah, that sucks.
Carlos is immediately like, I'm not taking the shot from that wood line, I'm taking the shot from that grass field. And the advisors are like, what? What are you talking about? To which Carlos is like, that's the last place they'd expect it to come from, so that's where it has to come from. I want you guys to drop me off way over here on the other end of the map. I'll go through these woods, and then I'm gonna low crawl for 3 days, moving 1 foot an hour until I can clear 1,200 yards to get within 800 yards of this villa, and then I'm gonna...
I'm just going back. Like, look at that.
1,200 yards to get within 800 yards of this villa.
Like, yeah, if this is like a... right where the S is in yards. If that's a small hill, God, that'd be highly visible. And damn,
villa, and then I'm gonna take the shot and hopefully sneak away. To which the advisors are like, I mean, sounds crazy to me, but you're the expert. We came to you for a reason. If that's how you want to do it, go ahead and get it done. Go ahead and grab your boy John Burke. You guys get ready. You're going out first thing in the morning. At which point Carlos informs him he's going out alone on this one. It's too dangerous, and moving that far through that grass field, he needs to be as small as physically possible. So Carlos goes back to his tent, grabs everything he needs. He grabs 1 canteen of water, a little bit of food, his rifle, and his Colt 1911 for a backup weapon. And for the first time since he found it, he leaves the white feather there because he doesn't have anybody else there with him to protect, and he wants every advantage he can get. From there, he gets in the helicopter.
Yeah.
They fly him there, insert him exactly where he wanted to be, drop him off right at dusk. He maneuvers through the wood line, gets to this field by nighttime, and starts low crawling all night long. And there's still patrols all night long. They're going around with spotlights, walking around. But Carlos only brought 1 canteen of water because he wanted 1 canteen on one hip. And he's not just going to crawl belly down this entire time. He's going to crawl on his side to leave as small of a trail as possible. Carlos is making himself so small, and he's moving so slowly under the cover of night that they would literally have to step right on top of him to be able to find him. And
Yeah, I think that's one of the things I saw in a video, like sniper training, that try to get as close to the like guy who's running its truck without being seen.
According to Carlos, they almost did on several occasions. They got within arm's reach. Fortunately for Carlos, every time the patrols got close, he could hear them goofing off or not taking this job very seriously, because he knew that they knew nobody in their right mind would ever try to attack that villa from this enormous field that's being covered by patrols. They'd be coming from that other wood line. So the enemy's guard is down and they're not being very diligent, which is exactly what Carlos wanted. At this point, he starts getting a little bit more confidence that he's actually going to pull this off. Carlos crawls all night long. He makes it 500 yards in, and then as the sun comes up, his strategy is to just lay there, not moving. Try to sleep the best of his ability while still being alert, and he just doesn't want to move at all. It's too risky in daylight. So that's what he does. He lays there, motionless, all day long. When the patrols go by and he knows he can get away with it, he'll take a sip of water. Maybe he tries to eat a tiny bit of food. Otherwise, he's just laying there. So obviously, this...
God, it's like... that has to be, like, torturous on you. Just figure, like... all right, cool. Go lay on your floor, and don't, like, with no TV on, no YouTube on, no phone for 20 minutes. See if you can do that.
Sucks, but the plan is it's supposed to suck, so everything's actually going great. But by lunchtime, a vulture, or whatever the Vietnamese equivalent of a vulture in this part of the world, starts circling overhead above Hathcock. To which Carlos is like, shit, what do I do? Do I just keep laying here and let it keep circling? Like, it's not going to get the balls to come up and try to eat me. I should be fine that way. But then he realizes it's a bunch of army dudes with their guard down, and if they see a vulture circling, one of those dumbasses might just be like, hey, let's go see what animal's dying in the field that vulture sees. So Carlos has to figure out a way to get this vulture to quit circling overhead. Now,
Oh, damn.
he wishes he could just shoot the fucking thing, but obviously that's not an option. So literally the only thing he can do to try to get this vulture off of his trail is to start moving slowly again, but now it's in the daylight, so it's extremely dangerous. But at least he's still pretty far away, and he's not up close, so maybe nobody will notice. So that's what he does. He starts inching along again in the daylight, hoping this vulture fucks off, and eventually it does. By then, it's nighttime again. Carlos, again...
That's lucky. Like, anybody just kind of look up going, vultures circle things. Yeah.
crawls all night long, clearing hundreds of more yards.
But if they're thinking, like, oh, no one's coming this way, they're not going to think it's an actual person.
By the time the sun comes up the next day, he's made it a total of somewhere between 900 and 1,000 yards in, meaning he only needs to go 300 to 200 more before he can finally get that 800-yard shot. Luckily, there's no vultures circling overhead today. Unfortunately, he is now being eaten alive by fire ants. In addition to that, he's out of water, he's out...
Oh, God damn. That's probably worse than the vulture.
food, he's dehydrated, he's hungry, and he's just laying in this field dressed like a bush, getting baked alive by the sun while fire ants are trying to eat him. And this is the hardest part of the entire mission, the mental game, the suffering of
Well, he could try eating the ants, I guess.
knowing that he's 1,100 yards at most away from his target, and he's taken shots that far before and landed them. He knows that in theory, he could take this shot right now and it could all be over, and he could just go back home and get some water, some food, and get these fucking fire ants off of him. At that distance, he could make it, but he can't guarantee it, so he lays it.
Yeah, this is also what he was testing guys out for, make sure they can deal with the mentalness. So.
There and just continues to suffer the entire day until that night when he advances forward another 300 to 400 yards. Somewhere between 700 and 800 yards away, he finds this tiny little elevation, this little itty-bitty hump of dirt that doesn't even appear on topographical maps. It's so small. And he gets on top of it, and this is going to be where he takes his shot from. The next day, he's watching with a scope, trying to figure out who the general is and get ready to take this shot. And after a while, he starts to figure out a lot of these guys keep going back to the same person, and that same guy keeps pointing, and then these dudes keep going and doing whatever he's pointing at. So clearly, that's got to be the man in charge.
They did not give him a photo? Oh, God.
That's the general. Carlos gets ready to line up his shot. His bubble of concentration starts forming. He no longer cares that he's dehydrated. He's tired. He's hungry. He has a bunch of fire ant bites. The only thing that exists in the world right now is his crosshairs, his trigger finger, and where that bullet's going in that general's chest. He takes his shot. He racks another round into the gun immediately in case he has to have a follow-up shot because he missed. And as he re-racks it and his scope recenters on the general, he sees him collapse to the ground, dead. As he's watching this unfold, his bubble of concentration finally bursts as an alarm starts going off, and he realizes, oh shit, this mission isn't over yet and I gotta get out of here. Just as he's about to slide down the backside of this elevation he's on, he looks and sees that all of the guards and patrols are running the other direction into the wood line, because that's obviously...
Oh, that is like the best thing plausible, is just, hey, they all think it came from the wood line.
Where a sniper would be hiding. Carlos's plan worked. Carlos crawls as fast as he can, gets out of this field, makes it back to the wood line, goes all the way to where he's supposed to have the rendezvous point, but because Carlos had spent the first day crawling as well, he'd taken this shot a lot earlier than anybody had anticipated. So now he's just gotta wait. That's the only option. So he finds
At least he's not being eaten by fire ants.
himself a nice little hide, conceals himself as good as he can, and he takes a nap until the helicopters wake him up when they get there. Same exact thing as last time. They pick him up in the helicopter. Did you get the guy? He's like, yep, I got him. Cool. Thanks, I guess. Take him back to Hill 55. Can't get the fuck out of my helicopter. Still doesn't even know who these guys are. But this story is also made up and completely ridiculous because Carlos never knew the name of the general, and the NVA never reported that they lost a general at this point in time. Okay, what?
Yeah, but if he's not part of the actual military and it's just a nickname because he's a mercenary that they're trusting, yeah.
One, never trust enemy documentation, especially if they're communist, and double that doubt if it's a lack of documentation that you're referring to. And two, if this was a MAC-V-SOG mission, which I'm fairly confident it was, it meant that Carlos was flown into Laos or Cambodia, not even realizing it, to take this shot, which means the NVA weren't going to report that they lost a general inside of a neutral territory that they weren't supposed to be inside of anyways, similar to how the US government never reported losing MAC-V-SOG operatives inside of Laos and Cambodia. And again, to be completely intellectually honest, I cannot stress this enough. I can't prove that this was a MAC-V-SOG mission. I tried for like a year. But humor me.
Yeah, but this level of covert ops is something you see in a video game.
Let's take 2 seconds and just Google it. MAC-V-SOG Operation 1967, the exact same year that this supposedly went down. MAC-V-SOG led a mission to eliminate Vietnam's top general by going behind enemy lines.
That's suspicious.
Okay, I can't prove it, but if it walks like a duck and it quacks like a duck, it's probably a duck. But
And it's probably the Fat Electrician's merchandise.
if you still doubt it, you should consult an expert and maybe see if they think it's a duck, and we can do that too. Okay, all the interviews we have recorded of Carlos Hathcock discussing all of this, those interviews were conducted by a man by the name of John Plaster, who was a MAC-V-SOG operative in the same theater at the same time, that became a sniper and then wrote like 15 books about being a sniper. On top of that, Jim Land, you know, his commanding officer and also a world-renowned sniper, was in multiple interviews after the fact and also never cast any doubt on anything Carlos said ever. So just so we're all on the same page, walks like a duck, quacks like a duck, and none of the experts at hand doubt its duckliness, it's probably a fucking duck.
Quack, quack. Shoot the duck! Shoot the duck!
Good use of classic cartoons, too.
I'm sorry, I'm getting sidetracked and angry. Anyways, so Carlos is back at Hill 55. Basically, at this point, he's got a couple more days of duty, and then it's time for him to pack his shit up and go back home to America. He's home for about a year, and then he gets sent back to Vietnam again in 1969. Now, over the last couple of years, and in part due to Carlos Hathcock himself, being a scout sniper has become much more well-known and much more respected. Because of that, the Marine Corps is actually starting to get scout sniper equipment, and Carlos isn't going to have to do his second deployment with a civilian hunting rifle. He gets issued a Remington 700.
But would he?
Chambered in 308, racks up a couple more confirmed kills, bringing his total to 93 confirmed by that ridiculous confirmation criteria, with somewhere between 300 and 400 probables. Then one day he gets ready
Let's just go with 3, so that's still 340 kills.
to go out on a mission, does his favorite strategy of linking up with an infantry unit, and then as they move along, at some point he's going to peel off and go do his own thing. And on this particular occasion, he hops inside of an Amtrak because they were mechanized. They're going along, it's an ordinary day, they're bullshitting inside the Amtrak, you know, just doing what guys do, and then all of a sudden, the Amtrak drove over a mine and blew up, and the entire thing is now going up in flames. Carlos is literally on fire, and the other 7 Marines are worse off than him as he starts dragging them outside of this flaming Amtrak one at a time. He gets all 7 of them out, gets himself out, collapses, still on fire, and then a Navy corpsman from one of the other Amtraks runs out, and I don't know how, but they said that he used water from either a puddle or a nearby pond to put Carlos out. Carlos is burnt to a crisp. They medevac him out of there. He goes through the whole medical system, makes his way back to Brookfield Medical Center. From there, he has to get skin grafts using his skin, whatever's left of it, other people's skin, animal skin. Because of the water they used to put the fire out, he ends up getting this weird fungal infection that he's got to battle. And then he ends
Yeah, water in foreign countries or have viruses and bacteria that non-local people aren't used
up
to.
getting a bunch of different types of staph infections. Then he ends up getting pneumonia, and by the time he fights all these infections, tries to heal from his burns, he's down to 97 pounds. He's in the hospital at Brookfield Medical Center from September of 1969 until January of 1970, and on January 5th, he walks out and returns to active duty. From there, he went on to continue to build and instruct the Marine Corps Scout Sniper program. That expanded into law enforcement and other branches of the U.S. military. He helped create what we know today as modern sniping. Health-wise, he never fully recovered. He was always wearing white cotton undergarments, a long-sleeve shirt, and long-sleeve pants because his grafted skin was so sensitive that the military uniform would actually chafe it and cause it to bleed.
Damn. I was going to just go with warmth, like if for some reason he wasn't able to stay warm.
Despite that, he still continued to train the next generation of snipers until in 1975 when he was diagnosed with multiple sclerosis. And again, despite that, he managed to hang on for 4 more years.
That's like a genetic thing you deal with your whole life.
Of active duty, continuing to be an instructor. After his retirement in 1979, he became a contractor consulting for the U.S. military and law enforcement agencies for sniping, obviously. He also, at this point in time, picked up a new hobby of going shark fishing because he's Carlos
Why?
Hathcock, that's why. Then in the 1980s, somebody writes a book about him called Marine Sniper, 93 Confirmed Kills. This book is incredibly popular. Carlos goes from being a legend inside of the Marine Corps and the U.S. military to being probably the most famous and well-known sniper in the world. And at this point, people start
Kyle Chris.
asking questions like, well, why doesn't this guy have like a bunch of high-ranking medals or the Medal of Honor? Like, why he seems like he's been underappreciated for what he's done. So Jim Land, his commanding officer, and a bunch of other people came out of the woodwork to testify to these award committees that Carlos should be getting the Medal of Honor for all the incredible things that he's done. The problem is he was in an experimental unit and they were busy. Nobody was trying to get awards at the time.
Yeah, it's the whole how much was actually confirmed type thing.
They were trying to do a job, so there wasn't a ton of documentation. And the other issue, in my opinion, he may or may not have been unknowingly doing operations for Mac v. SOG, which at this point in time is still super top secret and the government hasn't admitted even exists yet. And you see this a lot from people from that era not getting the awards that they actually earned because they were a place that the government said they weren't when they earned that award. You have war heroes like Roy Benavidez who earned the Medal of Honor and didn't get it until 15 years after the fact because he was in Cambodia on a Mac v. SOG operation when it happened. So this award appeals process gets drug out for years, and by 1996, Carlos Hathcock is diagnosed with Parkinson's. In combination to his burns, in combination to his MS, he ends up being bound to a wheelchair. In that same year of 1996, he was also retroactively awarded a Silver Star for his courageous actions of dragging those other Marines out of the burning Amtrak.
I figured he would at least get that. That wasn't even like the sketchy fun stuff that he was doing. That was just standard, like, hey, I'm actually with the unit.
His other incredibly heroic acts would go unrewarded, and in 1999, 3 years later, he would pass away due to medical complications at the age of 56. So in conclusion, that is the story of White Feather, Carlos Hathcock, the greatest sniper of all time. Thank you for watching. Best way to support the channel is go buy some merch over at thefatelectrician.com. Quack bang, out.
It's always something afterwards.
All right, for every item purchased out of my merch store for the month of August 2024, you're automatically going to get 1 entry to win this custom Steelhead Outdoors locking cabinet. It's pretty awesome. You can put guns, whatever else you wanted inside of it. Inside's pretty dope too, as you can see.
What is this COVID chest? Also, I probably should do that since I'm starting to get into firearms. Granted, I only have a pistol right now, but still. Jeez, not included with safe.
But yeah, every single item, doesn't matter if it's a koozie, a sticker, a shirt, sweater, any item is 1 entry automatically, and then there's a free way to enter over on bunkerbranding.com. You can get all the links and everything over thefatelectrician.com. Quack bang out.
Would you like to be remembered?
But a pork roast.
Yeah,
That's an Arkansas man, you know?
That's it.
When you're gone, how would you like to be looked at or remembered? Would you like your legacy?
Just that I did a good job. I did a good job. That's all I want. That's all I want. Be recognized as somebody, Marine, trying to do his job.
And he was a Marine that did his job. No, like, there's like a lot of people, like a lot of reaction channels, all kind of say the same thing, especially since I'm not technically a reaction channel. I'm just someone who does reactions every so often. Like, it's not what I want my channel to be known for, is reactions. But, yeah, I don't know why these stories, especially now, like I said, 30, 40, 50 years later, aren't being actually verified by, like, the government. It's not being, like, made into movies. I know we just did Hacksaw Ridge, but it's like, we have all the stuff that you want to, like, make these stories true and real come to life. It's like, hell, make, like, I know we have, like, Call of Duty and all that other stuff, but, like, why can't we have a game where we're trying to recreate these type of events or real stories? But that's it. That's all I have. I will see you weird people later.